Okay, before we get into factoring trinomials, I need to talk about what we like to call a diamond problem. A diamond problem is when I have two numbers, one on top and one on bottom, and it's kind of like a game. We're trying to figure out two numbers or two side numbers that multiply to get the number on top and add to get the number on bottom. So there's about 5 different cases we need to be concerned about. And the first one's the easiest, when both numbers are positive. If both the top and bottom number are positive, then our side numbers both have to be positive. So if I look at an example, 10 on top and 7 on bottom, I want to find two numbers that multiply to get 10 and add to get 7. So really, guys, all I'm talking about is what times what gives me 10? Well, it can either be 1 and 10 or 2 and 5. So which one of these pairs both multiplies to get 10 but adds to get 7? And hopefully you see that's 2 and 5. Second scenario is I could have a negative number on top and a positive number on bottom. In this case, we're going to have one positive number, one negative number, and the positive number is bigger. In other words, the reason the positive number is bigger because if I add a positive and negative together and I want it to be a positive, the positive number has to be bigger. So if I look at negative 20 and 8, well, let's think about what goes into 20. So we got 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. Now, since I know it's this case where I got a negative on top and a positive on bottom, and the bigger number needs to be positive, then I look at the smaller numbers and make them negative. So now I want to know what these, I already know these all multiply to get negative 20, but which one is going to add to get positive 8? And that would be negative 2 and 10. Now I could also have a situation where I have a negative on top and a negative on bottom. This again is still one positive number, one negative number. This time the negative number is bigger. So if I got negative 21 on top and negative 4 on the bottom, again I want to find numbers that go into 21. So that's either 1 and 21 or 3 and 7. And I know the bigger number has to be negative. So I look at which one adds up to give me negative 4, and that would be 3 and negative 7. I could also have a positive on top and a negative on the bottom. In this case, both numbers are negative. So if I look at 24, what goes into 24? I got 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. But since I got a negative on bottom and a positive on top, I know both of these are negative. So which one of those adds up to give me a negative 11? Well, that's negative 3 and negative 8. Now, sometimes we'll have a scenario where we have a negative number on top and a 0 on the bottom. If that's the case, then the side numbers are opposites. So again, like 6 and negative 6, 5 and negative 5, things like that. So basically, 64, since we know they're going to be opposites, I need to know what number times itself gives me 64, and that's 8 and 8. So if they're opposites, one of those has to be negative. So negative 8 and positive 8 would multiply to get negative 64 and add to get 0. So let's look at how we apply these diamond problems in factoring trinomials. A trinomial is, again, a 3-term expression. The way we factor these is we want to make and solve a diamond. Now, our diamond is consisted of A times C on top and B on the bottom, and then we write our answer in factored form. Now, where I get the A and C from, the basic form of a trinomial is ax squared plus bx plus c. So A is the number in front of x squared, B is the number in front of x, and C is the constant or the number without a variable. So if we look at an example, factor x squared plus 9x plus 20. So we want to make a diamond. Again, on top of my diamond is A times C. Well, A in this case, the number in front of x squared is 1, B is 9, and C is 20. So on top, A times C, well, 1 times 20 is 20, and B goes on the bottom is 9. So now that we know how to work the diamonds out, I need two numbers that multiply to get 20 and add to get 9. And since they're all positive, then I know my side numbers have to be positive. So I need to figure out which one of these adds up to 9. Well, that's 4 and 5. After we get our side numbers, then we write it in what we call factored form. So we're kind of writing it back into the form where we use the Punnett square. So since I have x squared, I know this is x and this is x. Then we get our side numbers. Since it's a positive 4, put plus 4. Since it's a positive 5, I put plus 5. And yes, you could have had that switched around and had x plus 5 times x plus 4. So in example 2, x squared minus x minus 6, if I want to factor that. Again, A is the number in front of x squared, so that's 1. B is the number in front of x, so there's a negative 1 there. C is the last number without a variable. So if I make my diamond, again, on top I got A times C. Well, 1 times negative 6 is negative 6. On bottom I got B, which is negative 1. So now I've got, both of them are negatives. That means one has to be positive and one has to be negative, but since the bottom's negative, the bigger number has to be negative. So if we look at what number goes into 6, 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. Well, I know the bigger number would have to be negative because the bottom number is negative. And the top number is negative. So negative 3 plus 2 is the one that will give me negative 1 if I add them together. So my side numbers would be 2 and negative 3. So again, that allows me to write my factored answer as x plus 2 times x minus 3. Okay, example 3, x squared plus 2x minus 35. So again, A would be 1, B would be 2, and C would be negative 35. So on top of my diamond, A times C, so 1 times negative 35 is negative 35. B is on the bottom, so I got 2 on the bottom. So I got a negative on top and a positive on the bottom. So I know my signs are different, and I know the bigger number has to be positive. So what goes into 35? Well, we got 1 and 35 and 5 and 7. And again, I know the bigger number has to be positive. So that means negative 5 and 7 would be my two side numbers. So I have x minus 5 times x plus 7. Example 4. Again, x squared minus 100. A is the number in front of x squared, so that's 1. Now, B is the number in front of x. Well, there is no middle term here. There's no middle term with the x. So B, in this case, is actually 0, and C is negative 100. So my diamond, A times C, so that'd be negative 100, and B is 0. So this is that special case where if I have a negative on top and 0 on the bottom, my two side numbers have to be opposites. So in other words, what times what gives me 100 that's the same number. So it's 10 and 10, But again, I know they have to be opposite, so one of them needs to be a negative. So then I can write it as x minus 10 times x plus 10. Okay, example 5. X squared plus 10x plus 25. Again, a would be 1, b would be 10, and c would be 25. So on top, a times c, 1 times 25 is 25. B is 10. They're both positive. So the two things that give me 25 are 1 and 25 and 5 and 5. And the one that adds up to 10 is 5 and 5. So that would be my two side numbers I'm going to use. So my factored answer would be x plus 5 times x plus 5. Example 6, x squared minus 12x plus 36. So a would be 1, b would be negative 12, c would be 36. So 1 times 36 is 36, and then I got negative 12 on the bottom. So if I got a positive on top and a negative on bottom, that means both side numbers have to be negative. So if I look at 36, well, 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, and 6 and 6. But again, I know both side numbers are negative, so then I need to pick out the one that adds up to negative 12. And that's negative 6 and negative 6. So I get x minus 6 times x minus 6.